Get your caffeination on, people. It's time for science. Now, can I throw a question at you to
go ahead.
Steer the conversation a little? So,
go ahead.
Did you find that there were flaws in the logic of my definition? Like, was there anything about the definition I proposed where you said, he's stacking the deck in favor of creation or against evolution, or it's based on false assumptions? Were there any logical flaws with the definition I've got? And if you need me to remind you what it is I've
Please
got
go
on
ahead.
the slide,
Remind me. I can't think of anything, but that might just because I'm not remembering it. It's full.
I'm seeing the tree of life.
Excellent. Okay. So again, my definition is based on two things. One is the Darwinian tree of life, the idea that as you go through evolutionary time, you start off with bacteria, which gradually give rise to worms, which gradually give rise to fish and lizards. And the point is that in order to get the structures and the behaviors that separate worms from fish, there has to be somehow gained by these worms, whatever worms or how many there are, the genetic information that adds those structures and the behavior to use them, and then true all the way up. And so based on those things, I came up with this definition, that evolution is an unguided natural process which increases the genetic information in an organism, creating new genes which did not previously exist. These new genes then cause an increase in physical complexity and associated behavior, both of which increase the organism's ability to survive and pass on these traits to offspring. So, again, while I understand people use a lot of different definitions for evolution, I find that all of them fail because they don't take into account both the evolutionary tree of life and the genetic changes that would have to happen in order to make those changes a reality. And so I created this not in any way, not intending to stack the deck against evolution or to make it sound improbable, but merely to define it so that it takes those two components into consideration. So instead of just the ambiguous change over time, I'm talking about the kind of changes that would have to happen for worms to become fish, for fish to become lizards, so that Darwinian evolution makes sense of the history of life on Earth according to evolution. So, is there anything in here that you want to push back on, say doesn't make sense, say I'm begging some question somewhere, or anything like that?
Sorry, one second. I'm just going to read over one more time just to make sure I fully... I was talking with Ibex about this. Sure, he'll correct me later when we're done with this and he gets a chance to. I can imagine this is going to go up on your YouTube channel.
Potentially.
I can imagine if he does end up seeing this, he'll correct me on what I have to say or point out what I'm not seeing here, because he actually studied this while I'm just kind of trying to talk to people. But the only thing that I see that I have a problem with is both the part here that says unguided and the part where it specifically states that it has to add information.
Okay. Well, I describe it as being unguided, as an unguided natural process, because I want to remove from the definition the idea that this is God-directed. Because there are sort of creationary evolutionists who would say that evolution is the process God used to create different kinds of plants and animals. And my point in saying that it's unguided is not to say that there's no forces at play, because again, people will say, well, natural selection guides it. And I'm saying guided is an intelligently guided, because I think the word guided talks about being end goal directed, whereas nature is not end goal directed. Nature is just the result of natural processes, laws of physics and chemistry. And so I'm separating evolution from the idea that it is a guided but somehow still natural process that potentially God used to create plants and animals.
Yeah.
So does that make sense? Yeah. Does that answer the objection, or do you have
no, that makes sense. So unguided in this sense is more just to say there is no brain trying to get a certain outcome out of it. Like somebody building a car or somebody painting a picture or something.
Right. That essentially, I'm intending that unguided and natural are meant to be synonyms here. That it's a natural process, as erosion is an unguided natural process. That erosion doesn't have a plan for how this rock is going to look later. It's just erosion is the weathering away of the physical bonds because of opposing forces. And so it is unguided in the sense that it is not directed toward a goal. There's no intelligent mind or will behind it. It's purely natural. So that's all I'm intending by the phrase unguided. And again, I have gotten that comment from people in the comments before where they're like, no, natural selection guides it. I'm like, natural selection would be one of the natural processes, but natural selection is not literally selecting, because selection is something a will or a mind does. Nature is not selecting. We talk about it in that way metaphorically. And again, this is just from Darwin directly himself in the beginning of chapter 4. He talks about the fact that he uses that metaphorically, that we don't really mean that nature selects, because it's like, well, which one of these do I like? Or, it doesn't have a will that's making those decisions. Just as we say that, well, gravity governs the motion of the planets and moons, we don't really mean that it has an authority and makes decrees and that it's obeyed. It's just that's how we talk about it. And so I'm trying to separate what I'm viewing evolution purely as I would view erosion, as unguided and natural. And again, this is why I brought up Mount Rushmore, is that Mount Rushmore is the creation of physical structures caused by the removal of rock. But Mount Rushmore is not an unguided natural process. Erosion is when rock is removed through unguided natural processes, whereas the removal of the rock that caused the four faces of those presidents was not unguided and it wasn't natural. So, again, I'm trying to make important distinctions between what nature does when left to nature and what can be done with nature when an intelligent mind intervenes. So,
that makes sense. If I were to be a smart mouth about this, one could say that I know animals aren't smart, but technically they are selecting for what they are looking for in their offspring. If we are to be technically about this, but I'm not trying to go down that route. Because
I get it.
It also says.
But again, the only reason any animal, including ourselves, selects certain things is because our evolutionary path has created in us the genetics that make us think and feel and act in that way. So it would be the end result of an unguided natural process before it.
My only problem with that idea is also ducks.
If that makes sense.
Ducks, they tend to not really care about their genetic gene pool. It seems to be ducks.
Ducks?
You've seen how ducks go about their mating. It's kind of. It's not really helping them.
Well, actually, Z Frank has an educational video about ducks in that capacity, which is a little more PG-13 than my channel tends to get. But ducks have male ducks have a feature of their male duckness that is to remove the, say, genetic possibility of a previous mater. There's no
Don't worry, I've seen the video. It's why I brought it up.
It's disturbing and kind of funny. I'm not recommending it because that's not what we do here. But well. All right. There was another part of that. Oh, well, first of all, are you content with my explanation for what I mean by unguided there, or do you think that
it was
that
just
still
a
is
for that one more? Just,
okay.
But I see what you're going for. I see why your brain went the word that you did, and it makes sense when I think about it. The other thing was when you specifically said that it has to add information. I do think that taking away information can help create a new species and should count as a form of evolution. And my example for this would be something like the narwhal. If you take away a torn, you basically just got a weird whale. Or a dolphin if you take away a lot of fat.
Well, okay, I get that. But again, the kind of change that I'm saying evolution has to be responsible for is the change from one kind to another up the evolutionary tree. So I'm specifying that kind of Darwinian change that grows the tree of life, as opposed to one that just takes an existing branch and just adds twigs to it. So, and again, if you're still seeing my screen here, that's why we have the creation orchard, is that the kind of changes you're talking about are the one that takes the dog tree or the whale tree and creates those branches on that tree. So it's its own distinct tree, each kind is its own tree, and by gaining or losing various changes, whether it's the shuffling of genes that were not in combination before, because two alleles that were not in the same individual's genome get combined through mating, or genes get switched off or lost, whether because of genetic mechanisms or because of just mutations removing them. You can have a lot of variability within the kind, which is how we got 400 varieties of pet shop dog. Again, we have 400 different kinds of pet shop dog and more every day, but it's not because we're adding new genes, new structures, functions, or behaviors. It's because the ones that were already there in the parent population are being shuffled, combined in ways that they weren't combined before, and lost over time. So loss of genetics is something that can cause a change in phenotype, a physical type, but it will not turn one kind of thing into another kind of thing, and that's how I'm distinguishing between what evolution is and just any other type of biological change. Which again is part of the reason why this definition is necessary, because if it was just any kind of genetic change that makes a, say, noticeable difference in phenotype, or what you would commonly call one species to another species, then sure, that totally works. But that's not the kind of change that will eventually turn, raccoon into whale, to sort of go with the Pachycetus is kind of like a raccoon dog, so I just refer to it as the raccoon to whale. But that kind of change needs more than loss of whatever it has. So again, if you take any kind of fish and you lose fish genes in whatever order, however long you want to do it, it will never turn into lizard. It'll just eventually go extinct.
That
The
makes sense.
distinction I'm making?
Sorry to go back to the to that one. I know we're going trying to go up to current day, but I'm just trying to find a way to explain, to show like it could work going down as well. Just if we, the idea itself, I feel exists, even if it is just not to get to where we are now.
Well, this is why I'm trying to distinguish between biological change and genetic change and evolutionary change. This is why I think my definition is necessary, is because what you're talking about is absolutely valid in terms of talking about how species arise. And again, for most of what Darwin's first book was about, the origin of species, in the sense that it is a variation on an already existing kind, there are mechanisms that make those things happen. That we find new beetles every year because the collection of genes that are capable of intermating through those different species create a new phenotype we haven't seen before, whether that's because genes are being expressed in a different way or combined in a different way. But what we're not seeing is that there are new kinds of plant or animal that never existed before, with new structures, functions, and behaviors that are caused by genes that did not exist before. So again, we've got 400 varieties of pet shop dog that 2,000 years ago did not exist. Those 400 species, if you want to call them that, or whatever category you want to put those under, the poodle didn't exist 2,000 years ago. The Chihuahua did not exist 2,000 years ago. They exist today. But the kind of change that caused them to come into being, I would not consider to be evolution, because it's not the kind of change that could turn a lizard into a dog, even though it can turn a dog into a different kind of dog. So I'm saying that it has to be able to add genes for new structures, functions, and behaviors that didn't previously exist. Merely shuffling or losing what you do have is a biological change, but it's not the same kind of change, and it cannot result in the growing of the Darwinian tree of life.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Does that make sense?
I was trying to think of something to come up. I can't think of anything that actually come against that. Again, I probably should have done a little bit more actual research on this, but I can't think of anything against that, because I can't think of any way in which new information on a grand scale, such as like our human forearms coming from fish without. Well, I mean, there is supposed to be a few hundred millions of years, but even then, I'm struggling to come up with anything.
Well, you're not alone. There just isn't any examples of it. There's one of creationists' favorite clips of Richard Dawkins is him being asked that exact question. That in order to go from one kind of thing to another kind of thing takes a mutation that is seen to increase the genetic information in a genome. And they say, so this interviewer says to Dawkins,
can you give an example of a genetic mutation or an evolutionary process which can be seen to increase the information in the genome?
Can you just stop one? I think.
And they turn the camera off, and when they come back, he's talking about a totally different subject. Now, a couple years later, actually a couple years ago, he sort of came out and wrote an article how he hates the fact that creationists share that. But other than just kind of scolding us for it, he didn't give any examples of observed genetic changes that increase the genetic information in an organism to create new structures, functions, or behaviors. So what we're asking for here is that, like, if you've got all the genes it takes to make a fish, how do you get the genes it takes to make a lizard so that fish can evolve into lizards? What observations do we have of that ever happening anywhere in any living thing, from bacteria to whales? When have we ever observed that kind of change happening? And I've never heard anybody suggest anything. Now, if you go through my videos, of course, Professor Stick suggested that we have observed it, and the example he gave was something that happened between 6 and 40 million years ago, which led me to go, do you not know what observed means?
But wait, it gets worse for the professor. He says, we've seen this many times.
We've seen this many times.
He says, it's been observed.
This has even been observed to have evolved twice in 2 different monkey populations.
Note, observed. I said we've never observed it, and he says, it has been seen, it has been observed. We have never observed a beneficial mutation that added information to a genome.
This has even been observed to have evolved twice in 2 different monkey populations.
Okay, let's Google the monkey protein he's talking about, since he doesn't know what a genome is. From the various articles I've been able to find about it, the only ones which try to put a date on when we have seen this beneficial mutation adding new information, by which Stickboy means combining 2 existing proteins into a new protein, roll my eyes, was, and this is just an estimate, between 4 and 22 million years ago. What did he say again?
We've seen this many times. This has even been observed.
So, even if this was an example of a beneficial mutation adding new information, and it isn't, it's not an example of something we have seen. At least, we apparently have not seen it for several million years. So, when Stickboy says we have seen/observed this evolution happening,
I'm sorry, but that's just a flat-out lie.
Who is the liar, Stickboy? Who is the liar? And proteins are not genetic information. And combining 2 existing things is not the same as making a new thing. Essentially, Stickboy is just wrong about everything he said. You got your chocolate on my peanut butter. You got your peanut butter on my chocolate. Oh, look, evolution. The creation of something new. It's not new. It's just peanut butter and chocolate. It's delicious, but it's not evolution.
If you're going to say that you're observing something 6 million years ago, I feel like there's information missing there. Maybe he's a time traveler. I don't know. Like, I don't want to blow his cover. Maybe he's got the TARDIS and everything, but I would say that doesn't count.
Hey, there's a reason we never seen the guy's face.
That's true. That's true. Because, you know, if he showed up in photos, we'd find him in history books, and maybe he shot Lincoln. I don't know. Just a hypothesis. I'm not accusing anybody.
Can't prove nothing.